guys, I want to introduce Levi Barlavi, and I've known him for quite a number of years. I don't know exactly how many, but he's here in LA, and I remember calling him years ago and then signed up for his newsletter. And and it's always good to have a resource. So I wanted to just start by saying Pacific Health Law Group, and we can put that up later, but very niche specific. And that's what I like. Anytime, because it's lawyers are somewhat like dentists. They could, once you say attorney, people start just calling on them. But if your cousin does, what is it, accidents and so forth, there's not the guy to call when you need something specific to dentistry. So we wanted to get someone that's directly in healthcare, been in healthcare for a while, and very specific to I more so the business side, I see.
Yes.
It's yeah, good, good. Because I know, there's problems that come up sometimes with malpractice and so forth, different things that your clients or dentists may get in trouble with, and they may call. I would imagine what resources you move people around it, or you kind of handle everything. And if you need to outsource it or send them somewhere, you would do that for in that case.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what I was thinking that where we start, well, also I wanted to preface by saying this. Um, Anytime you listeners out there that's trying to start a practice or getting into practice, and one of my attorneys told me this years ago, and I'm hard headed, so it took me a little while. And she said, Dr. Lanier, please call me before you sign, before. And I could sign something, and then I realized I probably shouldn't have. And I sent it to her and started asking questions. She was like, it's a little bit late now. So with attorneys, it's almost like pay me now or pay me later, but it's better if you pay me up front and let's get this thing done.
They probably save a lot more money that way.
Yeah, a lot more money and headaches. So, and this the other thing I would say about attorneys, whether you like them or not, you can't get around it. It's almost, it's like death. If you're going to get in business, you have to have the attorney, and you have to ask and get the consultations up front before you make
Kind
that
of like
move.
going to the dentist.
Right, you have to see us sooner or later. You got to do it. So I think it's good though, especially the one thing for my the entrepreneur dentist and my followers, I wanted to say is anytime you're going to go in any direction, have a plan and get your plan vetted. And you want to start by getting legally vetted before you make any kind of moves. And I think that that's why it's so important to have you on at a time like this. So I'll let you talk more about what you do, and I'd like to kind of start out. What do you see mostly, and what would you like to address today as far as startups? And then we can kind of go from there. I have a list of questions, but I want to see how you would like to address it today.
Yeah, Dr. Lanier, I'm happy to chat with you. I've known you for a very long time. In addition to being a very sharp dresser and a great entrepreneur, you're just a great guy and great resource. So I appreciate you doing this for your audience. I'm sure a lot of our audience overlaps. So I've been a dental attorney for almost 15 years now, and I represent dentists in all their business transactions, everything from startups to acquisitions to growth uh, plans and exits. So all the business contracts included in the life cycle of the business of a dental practice is really my touch points with dentists. Actually, we are after having my name Pacific Health Law Group for a long time. I'm actually going through a rebranding, and we're going to have some exciting news coming out in the next couple months with a new website, new brand, and I'm writing a book for new dentists on acquiring a practice for the first time, and then going to have another one on the startup. So happy to talk to you about the startup journey and what dentists should look out for, and answer any questions you have.
Okay, great, great. So I think one of the things I kind of go with what I normally recommend dentists do, and that's first and foremost, find a niche. that they want to be very specific with. I was talking to my sister, who's also a dentist, and and she was telling me about an associate that decided she wanted to start her own practice. Didn't really get it vetted. She didn't think she was ready at the time, but she went out and bought a practice, acquired a practice, but it was she's African American, born in a white neighborhood. Didn't really get the whole thing vetted. The 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 patient flow when the doctor left took the patients with her. She went and invested a lot of money and so forth. So I think a plan for having that the niche and everything worked out. But after that, it's actually location. So with that, the demographics and so forth, then it's location. So I think that's when I would normally call my attorney, especially when it comes to lease negotiations and whether there's some kind of assignment or if it's a build out, whether it's TIs and so forth. So I think we should start with location, and with that, leases and terms and
Sure.
assignments. Yeah, that.
So location, I think, you hear it, location, location, location. It's everything in terms of where you're going to pull your potential patient population from. I think location is very important in terms of where do you want to live? Because your dental practice, in large part, is going to anchor you to a certain community in terms of where you're going to drive to, the type of demographics in that community. And you have to figure out, is it within a reasonable distance of where you want to live? I think is very important. I see a lot of dentists who are very concerned and get into the minutia of patient population and whether there's too many dental practices and can I survive. Um, you know, th there's a joke that you can be dropped in some place in Southern California and throw a rock and maybe hit a dental office, but the truth is there's thousands and thousands and thousands of patients. There's a building in San Francisco that has over 100 dentists in one building.
Wow.
And I use that as an example because, location for them is not as important, right? Because they're servicing as much of San Francisco, which is a densely populated demographic. And there's a dentist in that building that's just, barely getting by, and there's dentists who are just killing it, and there's everyone in between.
Right.
So, take location into consideration in terms of your demographics. Are you going to be a fee-for-service practice, chimo practice, a dental practice? Are you going to do high-end cosmetic work? Are you going to have, 12 operatories and be filling them up and doing a lot of work that way? Location is important in terms of how you want to practice. But I think even before that, you should think about what is your vision of practice. That's how I start my book is what is your vision of practicing dentistry? How do you want to do it? Do you want to be a doctor who's working 3.5 days a week? Do you want to be a doctor who owns multiple practices? If you are a doctor who's going to treat a lot of families, so being in a mall where there's a lot of visibility is probably pretty important for you. But if you're a specialist, right? Endo, perio, you can be in medical building because most of your patient flow is going to come from a lot of referrals. So, think about the vision and then work backwards. And location is certainly a big part of that.
Yes, and then the as far as once they find a location, of course, negotiating the lease, the terms of the lease. And I think most, especially in California, and I would imagine elsewhere, we go 10, 5, 5, or the initial the terms of the lease to make sure that we invest. And once we invest all of that money in a build out, that you don't have a 3-year lease and then you have to renegotiate or move or something. So I normally suggest to dentists that they do probably a 10 with 2 5-year renewables, but what do you normally suggest on something like that?
Well, let's take one step back. How are you going to find that location? You're going to usually find it with a broker who has a specific experience of working with dentists to find that right location, right? And what that broker, what that agent's going to do for you is negotiate the deal terms of that lease, like what you're describing. That's the rental rate, that's the amount of years of the lease, including the options. They're going to negotiate what kind of free rent you might get to give you that runway to build out the space, especially if it's a shell space. You're going to need probably 6 to 9 months to get that done. And they're going to negotiate some allowances for TI for you to contribute to that build out because it's going to cost a lot of money and they want to incentivize you to be in that location. There's probably about 15 to 20 economic terms that you negotiate in the beginning of the lease in an LOI before you move on to the lease contract. And in terms of the length of the term, what you're describing, I usually recommend that the dentists have a 10-year term plus 5-year options. In most leases, especially in California, you'll see a 5-year lease or 10-year lease plus a couple options added onto there. That's very important, especially if you're getting a bank financing, because if you have to pay out that loan for 10 years, and some banks are now making the period 15 years, you want to have that runway in that space and make sure you have the option to extend it to cover that bank loan while you're there.
Exactly. That's very good. And normally, with de novos, and I've done mostly de novos versus acquisitions, but I think acquisitions are good for especially a startup if they've never owned an office and don't know and feel very comfortable about marketing because you start with some revenues already there versus having to jumpstart it. Even though I think there's some advantages because for me, de novos, well, I've been doing it so long, so it's kind of different than most guys who are kind of starting. I know if you're just starting out, a little bit nervous about it, unsure, you want something that's already existing so that they can kind of take off. But then you want
Well,
to
right,
find
man,
like
there's some other factors that will dictate this, right? If you're a specialist, right? If you're a pediatric dentist, orthodontist in specialty, they're just not, there might not be practices available for you to buy. So most specialties actually have to start de novo, what we call from scratch. And it's just the route that's more likely you're going to take to start your first practice. But I agree for a first-time doctor, especially if they're a general dentist, who is not very confident about the ability to market yourself and build out systems from scratch, it is often helpful to buy a practice and get plugged into one that has a patient base, has a referral program, hygiene program, and all those systems kind of built out.
existing. It's yes, very, very good for those that, especially general practice. But yes, I agree with specialists and need less space, and hopefully they already have their contacts because it's a referral-based business. If they have that set up, like you said, you could even be in a high rise and do really well. So the location is less specific, and even people are willing to travel further for specialty care like that. So I think that's a big one. I wanted to go next to financing. Um, what is uh, what is your advice and so forth that you give to your clients when they're asking about financing?
So, the corner building blocks of any business are financing, insurance, and your entity formation, right? What type of entity you're going to have to own and operate the business? How are you going to mitigate risk by having the right insurance? And how are you going to get the capital to build out everything you need to build out and also be able to have that working capital? So, the financing component, almost all doctors are going to 100% finance these deals with bank loan. And when I say 100%, they're not going to come out of pocket in order to do the project. The bank's going to give 100% financing to a doctor to start a practice and give working capital to doctor. I always highly recommend they work with dental specific lenders who understand the costs of a practice, who can look at a doctor's own credit and finances and appreciate that regardless of the fact that they have a lot of student loan debt, dental practice lenders understand the timetable to break even and grow in a practice. And so they give it 100% financing. And the stat that I love to tell new doctors, and I was just speaking at UFC, is, the default rate for these banks when they give out loans, across like 10,000 loans that they give dentists to do startups and acquisitions, they have a rate by which they know how many of these loans will default. Their default rate for dentists is at less than a fraction of 1%. Dentists are as a good of a borrower in this economy as you can find outside of mortuaries.
Yeah, they're
So,
guaranteed 100%.
everyone has teeth and they need help with their teeth. Um, you're going to go to a lender to start your project, to get your financing for a project. And your loan is generally going to be for 10 years. And they will give you a little bit break to make payments because you won't be up and running. There's a lag time by the time that you sign your lease and you have that practice built and open. So generally they give you a lag time where you don't have to make your payments and the payments start when the business is open.
Fantastic. And that is something that I find kind of mind-boggling. But I know the reason that most dentists, but when you think about it, if they're going to loan you 100%, and the default rate is that low, that means they really believe in, and it actually works. But with that, because very few dentists know and trust themselves to do business, they don't accept it. It's almost like they're eager to loan you money and you won't take it.
Yes, 100%. And this is one of the top things I'm talking about in the book I'm writing is that the banks believe in you. They know
Yeah,
you will be successful. They believe in you. It's whether you choose to believe in yourself. And this is not to discount the fact that, running a business is extremely difficult. You will pay off that loan, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy for you to get your sea legs and learn how to become an entrepreneur and leader in your practice, just like you learn how to become a dentist. But it does mean that the banks know something that most dentists can't appreciate themselves, which is that they're going to be able to pay that loan off and be successful.
yeah. At least, like you said, at least successful enough to pay the loan off and make a living. Some will be highly successful and others moderately, but still as a dentist or like I think the next one is veterinarian, either somewhere above or below the dentist. But yeah, very, very secure. And I think the reason most dentists don't is because they don't take the time to learn enough business to feel comfortable with it. But that's why we bring people like yourself on so that we can aid our listeners and let them know it's it's fairly simple, but it's not easy. By that, I mean it's something that you want, especially if they loan you $1.5 million dollars and you already got some school debt. Now you're about $2 million in debt. You shouldn't be sleeping on that. I was talking to someone the other day. He wants to start a practice, and he was like, "I'm even willing to work 4 days a week." And I was like, "When they loan you $2 million, you should be saying, 'I'm willing to work 7 days a week until I get this thing going.'"
Right.
So it
Right.
takes a little bit, I think. Um,
Most doctors for new startups, the banks will loan you, anywhere from 400 to 700,000 dollars for your project. That's the cost. That will include enough money for you to do your build out, all the construction, permitting construction, enough money for you to buy all the equipment, furniture and equipment that you'll need to equip the office, and then your working capital account. That's the money you're going to use for operations of the practice for day one to pay your employees. That means make payroll, pay your rent, and do your marketing and have your consultants with you. So there's a roadmap there Not that it's easy, like you said, but the roadmap is there.
Yeah, yeah. I would push it a little bit higher for me, I guess, because we do larger offices
Dr.
and we're
Lanier,
kind of
you're in a
elaborate.
different class of dental entrepreneur.
Yeah, but I do recognize that you could start. It's like I said, it's been a long, long time, but start small and then move up
Yes.
into it,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
that is a good
Yeah.
place to
And then
start.
once you get to a certain level, it's like having a credit card, there's more opportunity available to you in terms of construction loans and if you want to buy a building.
Yeah, there's okay, I'll ask you about a few more. There are things like employment law and just having employees, period, compliance, regulation, sexual harassment kind of things. How do you go through or you give them pretty much a standard book of things to start out to study or well, how do you what advice and how do you tell them on handling something like that.
Well, the one thing I tell all clients is that depending on the state you're in, employment laws vary from state to state and even county to county in terms of minimum wage and some of these rules, right? And so you want to get your team together. Um, I have gone a little contrarian in terms of having employee handbooks. I used to be a big proponent of employee handbooks. And then what I've found in my 15 years of doing this is that most dentists who have been given a handbook or download a handbook, which is something you definitely don't want to do, and then hand it to their employees, haven't even read it themselves. And what ends up happening is that they don't know what's in their handbook, and they don't apply the rules correctly in their own handbook to employees, and then they sometimes face lawsuits after the fact, and that handbook, instead of working as a roadmap and as a shield, it almost is used as a sword against them because they use the rules in their own handbook discriminately against their own employees. So applying it to one and then firing someone for not, for breaking a rule, and not applying it to others. So you want to be very, very, very careful when it comes to employees. You want to talk to someone um, who is a counsel who has experience for employment laws in your state. I do recommend that for your employees, if you're going to do a handbook, make it very simple, something that you understand, and do have employment agreements. And those employment agreements should dictate, how are these employees classified, whether they're W-2 or 1099s. How are they going to get paid? It should outline their vacation time and any benefits, if any, right? And then it should also have rules in terms of conduct while they're there. The thing that most dentists get caught up in, especially when they're bringing on associates, is can I prevent this associate from competing with me while they're working for me and then after they're working for me? And the fear is that the associate's going to come in and take their patients and open up a practice next door. I generally think that this is a kind of defeatist mindset, and that, if you have an abundance mindset, your practice will thrive based on your leadership and the systems you put in place and your customer service and the front office staff and your hygienists, and that's what's going to make your practice sticky with patients. When it comes to non-competes, these rules are different from state to state, and you have to be careful of what you put into these contracts. So, really, the take-home advice is if you have contract that you want to implement or you have an issue, make sure you talk to counsel who understands the rules and can probably guide you on these rules.
Yeah, they changed. I think the non-compete in California a few years back, and now it's not very effective having a non-compete with the dentist. I
Well,
think that. Go ahead.
this is often very confusing because
Mhm.
everyone knows that in California, non-competes are not enforceable. However, however, that does not mean that you can't have a non-compete when you sell a practice. So in that first example of your friend that you talked about who bought a practice and the seller took the patients, that was likely a situation when the buyer wasn't properly protected and didn't have a non-compete in there, a non-solicitation in there to protect the goodwill that was purchased from the seller. When it comes to your associate, the rules are very different. You cannot prevent in California an associate doctor from opening up their own practice within a geographic radius after they've stopped practicing with you. You cannot prevent that.
Yeah.
What you
And
can,
go
yeah,
ahead and say,
yeah, sorry, doctor. What you can do is you can say, as a condition of working for my practice, while you're working here, you're not permitted to work at another office within a certain mile radius. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't restrict their ability to work after their stop.
yeah. And just to you guys out there, over the years, I've found that um, if you hire enough associates, sooner or later, someone will try to steal not only the patients, but your best staff. And
Yes.
that's because they like the people they work with. And when they decide to leave, they're accompanied with them and they'll pay them $1 more an hour to take them away. And you have to be able to swallow that and keep moving. So it's all kind of baked in the cake. It happens. You just have to think, I'm a competitor and I'm going to keep competing. I'll get someone else. And that's why if you have great systems, you can replace someone.
Yeah. I mean, I know talking about sorry, I have doctors who go ahead and open offices right next to some of the biggest DSOs because they know that there's a lot of patients coming through the front doors, but there's a lot going through the back door. And
Right.
they can look across the street and see a boutique mom and pop dental practice that has a lot of personal touch. And that's their differentiator, right? So
Yeah.
you have to figure out how to be, even within the practice, be different, have your differentiation and provide uh, um, leadership so that your team doesn't want to leave.
That is true. That is true. Um, the other one I was thinking because you did mention if it's like Denti-Cal or Medicaid, I know there's a lot because it's both a federal and a state program, that a lot of people get in trouble because they don't really read the manuals and so forth, or don't know to comply. What do you think of maybe compliance officers? What I've done over the years, I've used consultants that are specialists in compliance and certain things, and they come in and do training, whether it's on sexual harassment, whether it's on
Right.
OSHA, and yeah, and all of those things. What do you think of them using things like that?
There are people that you will encounter, consultants, lawyers, CPAs, that have two purposes. They either make you money or they help you from losing. I help clients from losing money, right? A consultant can help you make money in terms of marketing or branding or investing, right? So OSHA consultants, consultants that are going to help you in terms of HR support, um, consultants that are going to help you with Denical. These are all consultants that are going to help you affect your bottom line by reducing risk that will ultimately cost you more if you make a mistake. And so while it's hard sometimes to pay someone to do something where you haven't seen a problem yet, the investment is really in preventing a larger loss in the future.
That is so true. And that's, the thing I like about what you just said is it's paying the consultant and outsourcing it. I like outsourcing because if it's not working out, I can just get rid of them. Once they become an employee, it's like I'm married to, especially in California. You can't get rid of people. It's hard as hell to just fire. It's almost like trying to get a divorce. You've got to really be careful. But if it's outsourced to someone, you can just you can measure and say, well, okay, this isn't working. Maybe I'll try this one over here. But it's worth it, guys. I think at least to investigate, because if you have to hire people, sometimes you find now they got to do on the job training. The thing with the consultant is that they already know, and at least they should already know. And like uh, Mr. Barlavi is saying, is that they help keep you from getting in trouble. Same thing with attorneys and accountants. I think a lot of time business people get in and they jump in and they want you guys to actually guide them on business decisions. And mostly for accountants and attorneys, it's no, don't step over here. You can do this, but you can't do that. So it's kind of like being your eyes and ears, but you still have to be your own entrepreneur. It's just that you need legal and accounting to tell you what is where the law is and what you can and cannot do.
Just like, I mean, dentists are experts in their field, and even specialists are expert within their field. Outsourcing it to someone who's an expert is often going to be the shortest distance to getting the result that you need.
Sure. Well, this is going good. I mean, let me ask you this then. Frequently asked or frequent occurrences or situations that get dentists in trouble. What are the top two or three things that you see that get dentists in trouble, and then they call and oops, they all things hit the fan.
Well, fortunately, uh, are we, so I do deals, as you know, because we work
Yeah.
together in startups and acquisitions. So I'm putting deals together. This is in going into practice. And then there's a lot of issues there. Then there's a lot of issues in terms of being an owner. Which one do you want to talk?
Well, I guess what I was thinking more so that they start a business and then they realize they probably should have called, but now they find themselves in trouble. And just what do you find being the most frequent things that they do and step over the line and in trouble, and then they call and need you to kind of
So,
bail them out?
one of the biggest headaches dentists have is with staff, right? Not properly classifying their employees as W-2 employees, and then having issues as for misclassifying someone as an independent contractor, or not giving employees their meal and rest period breaks as required by law, and not properly paying their overtime. So the staffing issues is a big issue with a lot of practices. And then insurance and a lot of times insurance reimbursement, right? Claims are are a feeder for other problems in the practice. So if you're misbilling, if you're upcoding, if you're not properly documenting the treatment, right? And then you have an audit by United or another one of these insurance companies, they're going to find other issues that are going to be problematic for you. So making sure that your claims are 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 proper, and that you're properly taking notes within the patient records and you're getting your consents is a big benefit, again, in terms of reducing the risk of other problems in your practice.
Right. Yes, I was thinking those kinds of things you need to be proactive rather than reactive. So, to you guys out there, at least try to find out what the boundaries are. That way you're not stepping outside of the line. You want to be proactive, learning as much as you can as you go, because and once you're reactive, then you've gotten yourself into a little bit of trouble. And that not only takes money, but it distracts you from seeing the patients, focusing on what you want to do. And it's just better if you try to learn as you go, find out what the rules are. And if you're not willing to do it yourself, hire someone and let them guide you. Don't do this, doc, and let them do continual training for your staff, those things, and document everything. So I think that's a good way to go. because with everything, there are consequences and commitments. And my attorney once said, anytime you're going to sign something more than $5,000, you should hire a lawyer to do some consulting. I think that's a good rule. I don't know whether it still stands at five. That was back at, a little bit, but I think it was pretty good rule back then and probably now. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to my doctors who are investing or buying a practice, and I remind them that they're taking out a $700,000 loan or they're taking $1.5 million loan to buy a practice, that's a huge investment. It's a huge investment. It's an investment financially, and it's an investment in your career. You're closing all the opportunities to take this path. And so, having someone with experience to try to mitigate the risk in the deal, like an attorney who's done three, four, five, 600 of these transactions, who will also give you, sound business advice by putting you in touch with the right people or making sure that you're double checking to do due diligence properly. This is ultimately a protection of the investment that you're making. If you look at from a comparison dollar to investment standpoint, it's much worth it if rather than just looking at a cost expense.
Yeah, I think, and that's really it's some sound advice is if you're spending money or you're going to make a commitment, because anytime you commit to something, it has consequences, either good or bad. And I know I've been a fool and just think sometimes I have to go through it two or three times. But I remember I signed some paperwork with and this was a real estate deal, but the guy I was partnering with, he actually brought the attorney in, and there was a conflict of interest. But um, I talked to them, and the next thing I know, I was signing papers. And then later, when there was a disagreement, I knew I was in deep doo when he said, "You need to go back and read your papers." And I was like, "Damn." I signed that thing, and that was his attorney. He brought him in, and he handled everything. So you also, guys, you need your own attorney. Don't go based on if it's someone else and their partners or whatever. Everybody kind of needs their own attorney. If there's, I'll let you kind of speak on that as well.
Yeah.
Anything on that? Because there's a conflict of interest anytime you're sharing the same attorney on both sides. Or what do you think? What do you say on that?
I always tell my clients this, yeah, I'm not one of these that says that you need an attorney for everything. Everything in life is a risk, and it's a matter of managing the risk and what you can tolerate, right? And so if you have a contract that doesn't obligate you for a long time or doesn't cost that much, it's not necessary to have an attorney for every contract that you're going to sign. No one does. But if you're investing a lot of money or you are committing yourself to a relationship like a partnership, for instance, a partnership is a serious entanglement if you're starting a dental practice with a partner. And so it's very wise for each of the partners to have an attorney because you want to talk to your attorney about what your specific goals are, not right now, but potentially in the future, and work backwards and to see if this partnership and the partnership document is is going to benefit you or harm you in a certain way, and then manage the negotiations that way. So I think it's very important.
That's one of my next one was the partnerships, and I think, as we were saying earlier, partnerships are like marriage. You get in it; it's hard to get out, and most of the time, it's the things that was unanticipated that come up after a period of time. Things change. The partner gets married, and then their spouse decides they want to do something a certain way, or something can happen. So there's so many things you need an attorney and insurance, as you were saying. When you start getting into those kinds of things, need insurance and guidelines.
I'm personally not a big fan of partnerships. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I got to grow with a lot of my clients. I'm now 45, but I was much younger when they were starting out, and I see what happens. And typically, two doctors out of school want to become partners because they have such a fear of opening a practice on their own. So they say, I'm going to do it with a friend. Everything will be a lot easier. and I'm not gonna be responsible for everything. And the truth is you're probably multiplying the risks because most doctors start out in a very kind of similar stance in life in terms of the amount of debt they have and the fact that they may be single without kids and their hunger. And then over the next 10, 15 years, everything changes. You know, one gets married, the other doesn't, one has kids, the other one gets divorced, the other one's driving Ferraris and has a huge credit card bill every month, and the other one's frugal. And these life events put pressure on the business. And ultimately, you know, one might decide they want to slow down, and then there's resentment that builds up. So, a good partnership agreement will navigate these issues, but will always need to be amended as the practice changes and as the intentions of the doctors change over the years.
I think that because I recently started my second DSO, and that has cost me tens of thousands of dollars just to get uh, because I've always stayed kind of shied away from the partnerships. My previous DSO, I only had associates. This time, I wanted to try bringing in some people to partner with. I wanted to try it differently, and but I see why I have to spend so much money and so much time. You got to make sure because all of the possible eventualities that could happen that you have to go through. And you're right. I think starting out is not the best thing, especially if you're doing it because of fear, fear of not knowing. Yes. We're almost through. I know you have to go, and I'm supposed to bring my daughter a sandwich in a little bit, so not going to keep you too long. Transitions when they're acquiring a practice. You know, I was talking to someone the other day and who was asking me, well, how long should I ask the doctor to stay on to transition? And if we're both working there, then he's going to be taking some of my patient flow. But you know, since I haven't really done a lot of acquisitions, but I was telling him, me as more an investor, owner, dentist, owner, entrepreneur, and I haven't done clinical in 15 years. So I said, well, I would want that the owner, if I was acquiring and I was bringing in an associate, I would still want the owner to stay there about a year to try to allow that transition to take place. And what is your advice, and how do you talk to them on things
I
like
have
that?
my own personal ideas about this after doing it for a long time, but I do appreciate where you're coming from. But one thing, the facts will dictate whether this is even possible. If you're buying a one doctor practice, you might not have enough cash flow to support two doctors in the practice. And so, you know, the bank may not like this. So you have to see if it's even possible. I always tell doctors that it's always nice to have the seller on for a short amount of period of time if you have a very distinct idea about what they're going to be doing while they're there. Otherwise, you don't want them just sitting around waiting for patients to introduce you. I do not like sellers staying on for more than 6 months because I think that as long as the seller's there, um, they are the known quantity. Patients are going to want to be on their schedule. Employees are going to still look to them as a leader, and it's hard to have two kings or two queens in the castle at the same time sometimes. And so sometimes you have to rip off the band-aid. It'll be hard in order to gain the patient's trust and the team's trust and step into that leadership role. So I don't like to have sellers on there for too long, but it's also dictated by whether there's enough cash flow to support two doctors in the practice.
I like that. You know, as I said, I've basically only done basically de novos. I've had a couple of practices that I acquired, but I didn't acquire the goodwill. I just bought the practice and at the doctor to go and just took over from there. But I like what you were saying there. It's very true. If the doctor hangs around, then all of the patients are really going to want to see that doctor, and it takes away. And the only way I could see the two staying is if the second doctor was a marketing expert, and they say I'm going to fill it up, and we're both going to be working, and then I could transition.
Or if it's a two-doctor practice, there's enough
Yeah,
patient flow to support those doctors. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. The last two, goodwill. We talked about exit and the exit and getting money because I know there's exiting with the broker. My exit, if they're a small DSO or a DSO, they're more than likely using investment bankers looking at multiples of EBITDA. Whereas sometimes if it's single practice looking at just multiples of revenue or, 80% or 100% of revenue and different things. What do you find and what is your advice on something like that?
Well, if you're a doctor exiting and you want to sell your practice, I would always recommend that, it's better to sell a little early than a little bit too late because a practice on the decline with declining numbers is going to be a big red flag for any bank. And so you want to make sure that you're maintaining a steady revenue cycle for 2 or 3 years before you sell the practice. In a loan doctor practice, it's oftentimes very recommended to have a broker because you'll have multiple offers and you'll have backup offers if your first position buyer falls out. If you are a doctor trying to do it on your own, you might be waiting a very, very long time to sell because the buyers are not necessarily going to feel the pressure if there's no other offers on the table to get the deal done. In large practice, multi-practice doctor operations or DSO operations like the one you had, Dr. Lanier, that's a whole different ball game, right? You usually do need a bank investment banker who are going to look at the financials in much more detail than a broker would to get the actual EBITDA and then figure out what multiples you can get on a sale like that.
I had a call just a few days ago on one. Doctor was asking me about a practice. Had the last 3 years of P&L, the practice had sold 1 year ago, and it was like I think about $900,000 in revenue that 1 year. But the two prior years, it was only about 350. And they were asking me because normally you kind of average the past 3 years, and he was saying, well, they don't have 3 years. They only have the 1 year and then the 2 years of the previous practice. And I was saying, well, that's their fault then, but you still got to average the past 3 years because the 1 year could be an outlier. I don't know what it is
Yeah,
or whatever.
so yeah, any bank who's looking at the numbers is going to really try to determine before they put their money on the line what accounted for this huge threefold increase in the practice? How do they bring in this revenue and is it sustainable? So that's why they usually like to see banks will ask the sellers to provide 3 years tax returns because they want to see the average of this revenue cycle to make sure that it's not a blip, or if there's a dip, the doctor can account for it and it's not something that they have to worry about.
That's true. And I do have to hit him back on that. The tax return as well as just the P&Ls because
3 years
they,
tax returns, 3 year P&Ls, and then if the doctor has multiple practices, very likely going to need to show some bank statements to make sure that money's not flowing from other practices into this practice that would account for the revenue.
excellent. And I like the way you think there. I like talking with you, Levy. Let's for my listeners out there, this is very informative. We're gonna put his contact up there, and you can reach out to him. We don't have any kind of interest, him to me or me to it to him as far as any kind of monetary exchange, but whether you're on the East Coast, West Coast, or whatever, I have attorney, one in North Carolina, another one in Michigan. Doesn't matter where you are. I think he could be of help to you. So reach out to him. We will put your info up there, and we appreciate you so much as a resource, Barlavi. And we will hopefully reach out to you or you to us if we can help each other along the way. I'm all about community. So, and you have a newsletter as well, right?
Yeah, I have a newsletter. We have a new brand coming out called the Polished Dentist. So you can go to Polish Legal probably in May and see our new website. And I'm going to have a book coming out uh, sometime in 2015, The Polished Dentist, a guide to buying your first practice. And hopefully, going to be putting on more events for young doctors looking to learn more about the business and legal side of dental entrepreneurship.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have another resource here, guys, and it's all about being resourceful. We have great resources. Be resourceful. Reach out to him. Thank you so much, there,
Thank you,
Levy,
Dr.
and
Lanier.
have a great
Appreciate
one.
it.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.